Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have a guest in my studio today that has been a well-known figure in the Duluth area. He was a former school board member for 8 years. Welcome, Art. It's good to have you back.
Thank you, Marcy. Always fun to be here.
So, I'm sorry to say that you lost the election last fall, but Art, you haven't just moved into the background and become non-existent when it comes to what has been going on in the school district. Do you want to give us just a brief overview of what direction you've taken now?
Sure. I lost the election, but I was on the school board for 8 years. I won twice, lost once. And you're in there for 8 years, you learn a lot about what's going on. I hold dear to my heart, public education, children's education. And so what I learned did not go away. I still know that. I know the system. I know what happens. I know where the money comes from. I know how the budget is spent. And I will continue. I'm writing a column for the Zenith now, and that's been going pretty well. And I talk about generic things like how do political systems really work in Duluth? What's it really like to be on a school board? Those are things I talk about, but I'll also be talking about very specific things like money issues, about the relationship between the community and the school board, the relationship between the superintendent and the school board, the relationship between the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota School Board Association and the school board. And so, I'm going to be very active in all those. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I'm not going away just because, hey, this is dear to my heart. We have very poor reporting, of course, on the school board from places like the Duluth News Tribune. The reporting is really pathetic, and it's probably going to get worse. But as Thomas Jefferson once said, that sometimes having no reporting is better than having reporting which is lies and ignorance and distortions of the truth. And that's what happened. That's what the Duluth News Tribune does when it comes to reporting on, is it the school board, the city government. I know John Ray Moser writes for the Reader, very good reporter. He's shown very clearly that the Duluth News Tribune, which is the main paper of record in this town, they take a narrative that's set by the administration, if it's the school, if it's the city, and they run with it. They do not report on what's really going on. They don't report on relevancy to what their constituents want to hear. They report on what the administration wants them to report on, and the public be damned. And so I will be fulfilling that position. Lauren Martell is still writing about the school board in the Reader. So we're going to have a lot of real accurate reporting going on. As I say, the school would be better off if there was no reporter there, because all they do is report junk. And so I'll be there. That's one of the things I'll be doing, is certainly keep an eye out on my columns, because they're going to be fun. Because Duluth is my town, the schools are my concern, and we have a lot of issues, obviously, in the school. One of the interesting things you can say now is that, as you probably know, that when I was on the board for 8 years, I was blamed for virtually everything. I was probably blamed for global warming, who knows, by the superintendent and the other school board members. The reality was, I was one of the few people on the board that knew anything, literally anything about budget. I'm a monies guy, I'm an engineer, I'm a contract administrator, and the board needs help. The board does not reflect the community, and that's by design. School boards in Minnesota are very weak. They have virtually no control over things, and the public knows that. You can see, when the election had 28% of the people voted. Now, it doesn't mean the election wasn't valid. Hey, the elections have consequences, as former President Barack Obama said. But the way elections are handled, the perception of people of what in the community of what what the election is about, which in this case is the school, and people aren't interested because of the lack of transparency, because they know the waste that goes on, the lack of communication, lack of listening to the public, the poor graduation rates, the high classroom sizes. Those are things that people know. Things haven't changed. And in reality, I was on there for 8 years. I was not able to make change. Why? Because I was pillared as somebody who was disrupting things. They did not want any discussion about things. Well, the discussion is going to continue. Like it or not, they may have defeated me, but the discussions will continue in the future because this is our community, this is our town.
Well, they may have defeated you from being on the board, but they haven't silenced your voice. And that's crucial. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to be on boards, but that doesn't mean we quit and go home and cry in our beer or whatever, coffee, whatever. We have to keep fighting. And that is, I think, the thing that is missing in the concept of politics today is people think they have to always be that front person, but you can do damage by stepping back because you can take with you what you learned in that realm. And obviously you did, and of course I was there watching you, filming you, all that stuff. I'm very well aware of what went on. But you are now taking a new role, a different role, and I read your The Truth in Duluth, which is your website. I never knew one portion of what you came to this area. This is not your native home area. You've come from other places bringing all your background and information and experience with you, and you got busy right away. You didn't let any grass grow under your feet when you got in with Let Duluth Vote, who was fighting the $500 million makeover plan of our district. And now we got all the fancy new schools, and they're still not coming. The classes are still overcrowded. There's still a financial problem. And yet you now have that experience by being on there, looking at the figures and facts, and you are going to keep reporting it to the people. Tell the viewers, when does the reader come out? So if they're not familiar with this paper, they'll know that they can find out what you're talking about, and maybe mention the number of volumes that they produce and all that type of stuff.
Sure. Well, Duluth has two alternative papers. There's one is the Reader, the other one is the Zenith. The Reader comes out weekly, and that's distributed, I believe, on Thursday. They put out new copies there. Some of the Reader columnists are, it's a paper that's not really edited. People can write whatever they want. There's some kind of weird columnists in there, but there's some very good columnists. The two best columnists on there is Lorne Martell. He writes about the school board. He's actually in there. He quotes people. He looks at the videos of it and the audio recordings of it and gets direct quotes. And it's a very welcome exposure to what's really going on in the city. John Ramos, he's a reporter they're called the City Beat that works on the city. He does the same thing in the city. John Ramos is very good at getting Data Practice Act requests in. They actually answer him. He does everything from the library to what's going on the train systems in town, the tourist trains. That's some of the latest stuff he's been working on. Talks about Spirit Mountain. So that comes out once a week. So pick up a new issue there. And the Zenith comes out every 2 weeks, or maybe it's every 3 weeks. And I have a column in that, and there's other columnists in that as well. There's usually a feature story. The Zenith is not quite as thick as the Reader. The Reader has a lot of advertising for cultural events, people that are musicians when they're playing. And the Zenith is a little more, has columnists and feature stories.
And they are basically a few ads in there for that paper, but they're still, both of these publications are free.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yep, free. You can pick them up usually at the grocery stores, and select restaurants around will have these papers. That's the only reporting that's being done in Duluth. There's no reporting done by the Duluth News Tribune. It's pretty pathetic. And the reporting that's done is only what the administration wants. And for example, I can talk about this stuff now that I'm not on the school board. Frequently, whenever I would speak, the other board members, the ones that didn't like me, which was the majority, they would take out their cell phone and they would start checking their email on it. The Duluth News Tribune reporter usually types up everything that goes on. Well, she would quit typing whenever I would speak, and she would stare up at the ceiling or maybe grab her cell phone to talk. So that is reporting, and obviously her stories are obviously very one-sided, and there isn't any investigation going on there. And literally, as Thomas Jefferson said, I wish I had that quote, I should have brought it, but he said that newspapers are just full of ignorance and lies. You should not read newspapers. If that's the only newspaper you've got, it's better off reading nothing at all. And the Reader and the Zenith, they are an alternative. And I think every place, every city, every town should have an alternative paper. Some papers, particularly small town papers like the Timber Jay up in Tower, world-class reporting going on there. They actually talk about the community. And that doesn't happen. Most bigger papers, there's very little local reporting going on now, except your small papers and your alternative papers like the Zenith and the Reader. So,
well, I think you could say that too, though. About the news. Sit down and look at the news sometime. I mean, everything is like a little word or two about a particular item because they have to cover so many news stories, but they have so many advertisements on there, they don't have time to really do the news. I think that's true, like you say, with the newspapers in general, but I'm just going to make my own comment here. When you don't teach people to read, it won't be too long before newspapers will be obsolete, because all people know how to do is handle a cell phone or a tablet or something like that, and they cannot read. Now, I say that from experience when I remember two teachers who I happen to know from the past. They're 11th grade teachers at Denfeld, my old alma mater, and they were getting these kids with a 5th grade education. This is the school district we're talking about. And so if they've got a 5th grade education by the time they get through the 11th grade in science and math, what does that say about what's going to happen to these children once they're out the door who haven't got a decent concept of materials that need to be read? And so maybe we won't need newspapers anymore in the future, and we won't have to worry about whether they're reporting the truth or not, because they'll be obsolete.
Well,
it's just a thought, and that's a sad thought, really.
Well, you can take that. I look at it as being what is replacing newspapers? Certainly the web. Now the TV stations in Duluth were fairly good on the school board. But the trouble is with news TVs is that you have maybe 20 seconds to be able to say something.
Yes.
They don't have anything there in depth at all. There's no feature reporting at all in Duluth. There's no, like we're doing, no interviewing people, and like you see on the national TV, people are arguing over in Washington all the time. None of that goes on in Duluth. There is no reporting going on in local scenes. You have the public radio station, I forget the name of that. All they do, they're the same too. They only have, the powers that be talking about it and promoting that, and there isn't any pros and cons on there. They'll have the school board chair, the superintendent on. They'll never have any alternatives on there. So you don't have it there. But how do TVs exist on selling advertisements? And there's a lot of people watch TV, and a lot of people make money. So they have the token news. They're doing pretty well. Some of the TV reporters they've been the most interested and wanting to do a good job and being somewhat fair. Now, getting back to newspapers, print media. for whatever reason, print media is not doing real well right now. Everybody knows all you got to do is read any analysis of it. They're not doing good. So there isn't any ads in TV or newspapers anymore. You sell everything on Craigslist. There's most of I would say most of the money now that's being made off of newspapers is on their web pages. They have a lot of advertising on that. Everybody knows that Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg is one of the richest people in the world for basically being able to sell ads on Facebook, and you get all the other ones, Instagram, Twitter, all these other things. And it's interesting you say that nobody really pays attention to newspapers. That's true. So what's the alternative? Well, watching TV, we know the quality of TV. It's just, hey, it's a second bound sound bites. Facebook, now it's kind of funny, you know, I don't do social media. I do track it, but I don't do any of it for lots of reasons. But you follow, say, for example, the Duluth News Tribune. They do have articles, and you can go on and you can look in some of their Facebook posts. Most of the time they're ridiculing the Duluth News Tribune, but nonetheless there's a lot of comments there. But what do the comments mean? I told everybody that if you want to be effective in politics, you have to be involved. It's not easy. You have to learn about something. You have to get information from the people. When you have something like the school district that refuses to give information, it's really tough to find out. If you think you're going to find out about the school district by sitting on Facebook, you have another thought coming. If you think you're going to make a difference in the political system by making a bunch of comments on Facebook on some article or something, you're mistaken. Because if, say, for example, you can look at the comments on Facebook, say following the Duluth News Tribune, a lot of ridicule of the Duluth News Tribune going on, a lot of ridicule of the school district going on. And what difference has that made? It has made zippo difference. If people think Facebook is a soma, they think they can go on there, they can make their little comments, and ooh, aren't I great, look at that, what I read, look at that, it's going to appear on the comment thing. Does anybody read those? No. Does it reflect anything? No. Everybody knows that. Politicians know that, hey, let people talk over here on Facebook and we'll keep doing our little thing over here. And
it keeps them busy. That's all it does, is just keeps them busy.
It keeps them busy. It makes Mark Zuckerberg uber rich. And what happens, continuing the good old boys and the good old girls, they keep doing their despicable things behind the scenes. They don't tell anybody. They think that the public or something you have to find some way to work around. And one way you work around the public is you don't tell them anything. You lie to them. You get the Duluth News Tribune to lie for you. That's how the system works in Duluth. And I think we're not unique, but certainly been pointed out a lot. John Ramos, I mean, all you got to do is read his stuff about the city, about how despicable they treat the people in this city, and you're amazing. How do those people keep getting elected? It's really kind of amazing. But hey, that's the way it is, and now I'm doing the reporting on the Duluth News Tribune, on the Duluth Public Schools. We'll see. And remember, when you get elected, when you run for something, I never had a clue, I never had an inkling that I was going to get elected 8 years ago. I got elected by luck. I got elected by being under the DFL political machine radar. I got elected by being under the Duluth News Tribune radar. But as soon as I got elected, boy, they went after me with a vengeance, because I was not one of the good old boys in town. So it's kind of a tough way to go. But when I originally ran, I didn't run to get elected. I ran because there was an issue that had to be dealt with in our public, and I did the best I could in the public position. There was people that hated me with a passion because I had the audacity to ask questions. I had the audacity to speak out. And boy, that made some people in this town very, very, very angry. Now, okay, I didn't get elected, so what? I never thought I was going to get elected in the first place. You see what has to be done. You keep telling the truth. My whole thing is we have to have information out there. We have to have truth. Political systems don't work if there isn't any kind of information out there what people are doing. The Duluth News Tribune is horrible. They give all the wrong information. They don't even want to give right information. So it's up to the other papers here, and again, if I didn't get elected, I couldn't care less. Why I'm concerned about the school is, one, because I think bureaucrats should have accountability, and I do think that we have to expose the corruption when it's there, and the Duluth schools is rotten with corruption, and hey, that's why I didn't get elected. And hey, fine with me. I did a lot of skiing this winter, which I probably wouldn't have done if I had to go to school board. And I'll be writing a lot more, and it's kind of fun. And what can they do against me now? They can't. Now, the interesting thing is, okay, even the Duluth News Tribune is reporting about how horrible the financial situation is at the school. I've been saying that for 8 years, of course, hitting deaf ears. The Duluth News Tribune couldn't care less. All they do is a little rosy talk, happy talk. Well, now they got nobody to blame anymore. For years, they blamed me for all the problems with the school. How could they do that? Don't ask me how. Why? It's because it's a bunch of propaganda.
You were an scapegoat in their eyes.
Right. I'm not there anymore. So
right.
Now how are they going to get it? How are they going to explain the lack of enrollment, the dropping enrollment, the lack of graduation rates, the massive disparate achievement gap in this town? Nobody can blame that on me anymore because I'm not there anymore. And in a way, it makes me kind of feel kind of good. Hey, I don't have to kowtow to them and all. Not that I was good at kowtowing. I've never been very good at kowtowing. But nonetheless, I don't have to do any of it anymore. And so, hey, if you want to hear the truth, Marcy, about what's going on in the school, now I can actually tell you the truth. And
I think we did our very best to tell the truth, and you did that on my program anyway. So,
well, there were some things that I didn't say. I didn't talk about.
I know you couldn't say some of the things.
I didn't want to say things about my fellow board members, as bad as they were. I didn't talk about. They sit there when I talk. They sit there and grab their cell phone. I mean, nobody. I mean,
how disrespectful.
I mean, the school board does not deliberate. The school board is there to. It's there to give legal cover to the superintendent. The superintendent is unelected. The school board is there, nothing else than to be cheerleaders, as Sally Trinka and Jill Lofel repeatedly said during the campaign, is that they need more cheerleaders. Okay, it's a pathetic.
And now we have them.
We have them. Yeah, we got most the school board is made full of cheerleaders. Okay, that's cool. But what about the financing? What about the debt payments? What about the graduation rates? What about the accountability of the superintendent for, isn't he supposed to be able to fix some of these things? We don't, now the school board is only one to blame because remember the superintendent is not elected. One of the few things the school board should be doing is making the superintendent accountable. Now remember, in Duluth, there is the school board has made no goals for the superintendent.
I remember that, and I know you tried.
I tried many times to say that one of your goals, one of your things that we expect you to do is, say, increase enrollment. We expect you to increase our graduation rates. And boy, the board, oh no, they wouldn't do that at all. They were, oh my gosh, we don't want to be micromanaging the superintendent. And so instead, we got a situation now where we don't have a lot of good management. There's no accountability at all. The school board just sits there. They may think they're doing something. They got elected. Whoop-de-doo. They're doing nothing. They're doing nothing.
Well, and don't you find it kind of interesting, Art, that the assistant superintendent, what was her name?
Amy Starzecki.
She is now the superintendent of Superior Schools?
She will be here in a couple months.
Okay, and she didn't have to try 7 or 8 times like Gronseth has tried to get out of town many times. And what about the...
Michael Carey.
Michael Carey, who was Department of the... he was in charge of the Department of Curriculum, was that correct?
Yep, exactly.
He is the superintendent up in Cloquet.
Yep, been in a couple months, yes.
And so he didn't have to try 7 or 8 times to get up there either. I think they saw the quality in him and wanted him. So who's left in administration once they leave are we now going out looking for people to replace them, and will we find somebody that's qualified like they were to replace these department heads? It kind of doesn't look real good for the district right now, in my eyes. What's your thoughts?
Oh boy, good. Thanks for getting the conversation going in a good direction. Maybe a sad direction, but since I've been here, of course, we've went through 3 superintendents since I've been here. Gronseth, of course, is the 3rd one. First one was Dixon. He was here for a couple of years when I was on there. We had one very short, Ivy Foster, African-American guy who was fired again.
Railroaded out of town.
Oh yeah, of course. No, it was complete racism. But anyway, and we got Gronseth for the last 6 years.
A puppet of Dixon.
Yeah. I think
or
he's
clone,
more than a
or whatever
puppet.
you want to call him.
Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, we always hoped, we people that were hoping to implement some kind of change you need competent managers and leaders in a school. And the school board we are not leaders. We are paid $7,000 a year. Dishwashers make more than we make, literally. We have no authority. We do not have access to any information. We are not given access to lawyers. We have nothing at all. We have no
power.
Staff.
Absolutely
we have
no
nothing
power
at all.
Yeah.
So that's the reality. Is the school board is meaningless right now. But we kept hoping that getting some improvements on leadership. Amy Serzecki has been here for about 3 years now. She came from Floodwood. Amy seemed to be a breath of fresh air. We didn't agree on a lot of stuff, but we always had good discussions. She treated me with respect. She knew that I cared, and she knew that I knew what I was talking about, and we worked good together. She treated students, she treated staff with respect. And she was also, I think, pretty smart. She's seen the writing on the wall a long time ago. This was looked good on her resume. Looks even better on her resume that she got out of here, and she knows it. I mean, we are looking at financial issues. We're going to be in statutory operating debt. They're literally begging people to please give us more money. Even though they got plenty of money, but they're still begging for it.
They don't know how to spend it right.
Amy wanted to get out of here, and she got out, and the best to her. Michael Carey, he was the head of director. He came in also about 3 years ago, and he seemed to really care a lot about the curriculum. I'd ask him questions, he would answer those to the best of his ability. If he did not know the answer, he would say he didn't know the answer, and neither him nor Amy lied to the board. I think they were honest, hardworking people. I think they were sharp. I think they really cared about they're getting paid a lot of money. Both of them are making about $130,000, $140,000 a year. We can argue whether or not that's fair or not. But in their case, they took it seriously. They wanted to make sure that the taxpayers in the school was getting their worth out, because they're getting paid a lot. And I think they did their job well. And they had an opportunity. They got the first jobs that they applied for, they got. People recognized them, that they were quality people. That's really good for them. But it does it does make me worry about, they were the 2 quality people in the administration. They were the second and fourth people in the hierarchy. You got the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the chief financial officer, and well, you could argue whether or not Kerry was the fourth or not, but he was up there pretty
Certainly,
high.
Curriculum is a
that's
absolute
why we're
crucial
here, of
aspect of the
Right.
districts.
So the 2 of them are gone now. Now we're left with Gronseth. Everybody knows Gronseth. We're left, unfortunately, with a chief financial officer who doesn't seem to have a clue. We had hopes for him. He came in, but it has not panned out very well. And all I got to do is listen to some of the tape and listen to him drone on, and some of the patronizing talk that he does toward the school board,
Gee,
particularly
am I
the women
missing
in the school
something by
board.
not being there?
I think
Excuse
you
me.
are, Marcy. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
As a woman, you would be really appalled at some of the discussions that has taken place and the speaking down to the board, which is mainly women now. And
Oof.
so anyway, that's my opinion, and we hope that he was going to bring a breath of fresh air to the financing, because that is where we're really lacking, but he's not. So we're left with the superintendent who, okay, I don't have to say anything more about him, and so he's got nobody left. Hasler is nothing but a broken record of Gronseth, and he has no independent ideas. He's brought nothing new to the board at all, nothing new to the school, I should say. And that's my opinion, of course, and hey, now that I'm not on the board, I can express those opinions. And
Well, and that's why we have this program. I want the facts. I don't want the untruths. I've seen enough of that when I was filming it. So let's go back here just a little bit. With the new, okay, I got my tax statement, and I've read through this mountain of paperwork since I came back from my vacation, and one of them was, okay, I got to see what my tax statement is for 2018. There really wasn't a major increase in taxes for the 2018, but you got to remember, when you get that tax statement, those were decisions that were made a year before. So we're looking at 2019, and the last school board meeting I went to, I think that was when I came to thank you for your service, which was December. They kicked $419,000 down the road to 2019. So what is your insight on what is going to happen when we are hearing, in a little bit of it's coming from different sources, about what our deficits going to be like in 2019, and how are they going to come up with the money for that? Can people be prepared, if they pay attention to this right now, be prepared to get really hit hard in 2019 because of a major tax increase, because they're basically close to statutory, what do you call this? Operating deficit. So am I correct in what I just said, and would you explain that a little bit further?
well, the finances of the Duluth schools, it is such a charade. But anyway, I'll do the best I can. I'll try to go back. We passed a budget, which I voted for, probably unfortunately, but in June. I was still on the board at that time. At that time, the administration, with the big fanfare, announced that they had a $2.3 million deficit. It was about that. I forget my exact numbers now. But so anyway, they went through, and we had a bunch of heartfelt meetings that we were going to cut this and cut that and cut this and cut that, and they managed to cut this down to basically we didn't have a deficit. Remember, schools, we can't print our own money. We cannot run in deficit spending for very long. You can if you have reserve funds, for example. The school doesn't have any reserve funds.
We've blown through that.
Well, yeah, well, we could talk about that too. But anyway, that happened in June. Okay, the audit came out in November, and in December was the official audit that we got. Well, the audit made it clear that we had literally eliminated a little bit of reserve fund we had. We had about $2 million a year before, and it was down to, I don't know what, 100,000 left or something like that. And of course, we weren't told that when we passed the budget. They also said that we had a less enrollment coming in, and we were going to be short another, I believe it was another $2 million. So no, that's $2 million on top of the $2.3 million that we did back in June. Okay, now it came out again in the paper that suddenly they looked again, and they found out that, oh, the latest meeting, because I keep track of this stuff, some of the stuff is you can get on the web. We were now $6 million in deficit. Now remember, they kicked the $400,000. They were going to say, well, we're not going to cut any jobs or anything like that. We're going to kick this down the road literally and hope that some miracle happens and we can find some
Pennies
ways.
from heaven?
Yes, exactly. Well, then that went from a $400,000 deficit from next year, and the last one we've got now is up to $6 million deficit. Now, these numbers, I haven't looked at them close. Went from $6 million, and then there's a report in the paper, good quality report in the Duluth News Tribune that, they found some more money. Now it's actually only $3 million deficit. Okay, the numbers have been bouncing around so much that it's a charade. It is a complete charade. They don't have a clue. The chief financial officer does not have a clue what's going on. They keep throwing money out. They keep throwing numbers out. They don't know what's going on at all. And so now here's my hypothesis. No, I don't know if this is by design or not. If it's by design, it's giving them more credit than I think they deserve. But there was talk about statutory operating debt. Now, we were actually in it here several years ago. The Duluth News Tribune covered it up. I tried to get it out there. They covered it up and wouldn't report on it. We were $2.9 million in statutory operating debt is a legally defined financial state by the state of Minnesota. You take all your money, certain accounts, and if you're so much in the red that it's more than, say, 10% of several of these funds, then you're in statutory operating debt. Okay, now, what does that mean? It means that if you're in statutory operating debt, the state can come in and make some advising. What can they do? The only thing the state can do, they don't do anything, but they can allow you to raise taxes. So I'm thinking all these scare stories they've had, much of a charade that it is, but if it's is it a $2.3 million, or is it $400,000 deficit? Is it a $6 million deficit? It's down to $2.9 million deficit. All these different things show one thing, that the school it does not have a lot of money, and that what they can do is they will declare they're in statutory operating debt, and that will allow them to raise taxes without having a referendum.
Didn't the state give them that right a few years ago?
The state statutory operating debt, they can take abnormal means to be able to eliminate that, and that the only abnormal means is they can raise taxes beyond the tax certification.
Okay.
They can raise taxes literally as much as they need because they can't operate in the red.
Okay.
And if the state gives them some money, I suppose that would be a possibility, which actually should be done, but they're not going to, and instead they have to operate within their budget, which means the only variable they've got is taxes. And the state will give them permission to raise taxes more than they normally would to cover the debts.
Okay, so let me just back you up a little bit here so that I understand this, and maybe there's a question from viewers. So a few years ago, as I recall, the state gave the districts, the school districts, the right to bypass a referendum. And I recall Grunsis saying that we were going to take it to the voters. I think he was being nice. But explain to me now, this sounds to me like it's different than the statutory. When you get to the point where you're in statutory indebtedness, then it's a different situation where they'll do it, and they can take the max of whatever they need to cover their debt. Am I misunderstanding something here?
Okay, I'm not sure if I followed you exactly, but I think what you're talking about is here a couple of years ago, the state passed, which we called the Bach Amendment based on Senator Bach, which allowed school districts to transfer from voter-approved referendum money to board-approved referendum money. All they had to do was make a vote, and that was automatic. Since it's board-approved, they don't have to get any approval from the voters. So that happened. So a lot of the debt that we had was transferred over. So you see on your debt or on your tax statement, one will say voter approved, the other one will say just regular, whatever the other one says.
Right.
Well, you notice the voter approved went way down because by law, it was a sleight of hand. It moved that money. It basically mandated school districts to be able to raise local taxes, property taxes, without any recourse of the voters. If we had if we voted no for excess levy,
They'd do
we would
it
still
anyway.
have it.
They do it anyway.
And
Okay.
I think one reason that is because the state was having financial problems. I hear they're having financial problems
They
again.
never, oh yes, they always have it.
So, yeah. And
What else
one
is
thing
there?
I want to emphasize too, remember they talk about the deficit here. It's important for your viewers to realize that deficits are not the same as debt.
Okay.
We can't be in debt. We can. I mean, yeah, once we can go in a little bit here, but we have to have enough reserve funds to be able to pull it back out again. So you can bounce back and forth across that red-black line, but you can't do it too much. We're not like the federal government that can print money and literally or sell bonds or anything like that, savings bonds, that kind of stuff. So we don't have that ability. So what happens when you are getting low on money? They literally do have the right to raise taxes, but now let's go back to the deficit versus the debt question again. The debt is, if you go on your books, okay, we can't have any debts. Now we have long-term debts. We're paying back buildings. That's a whole other topic. We could talk for hours about that one, how we're doing such a poor job of paying back our debts that we built all these new, $400 million in buildings. Okay, but now deficit is a made-up term by bureaucrats, and I work for the federal government. We've seen the same thing there. You see the same thing in Washington. Deficit is the difference between what you want to spend and what your revenue is.
Okay.
Okay, the first cut, whenever there's a bureaucracy, and I'm not saying this is negative, but bureaucracies are necessary in life, but bureaucracies need money to operate. So they say they have to do planning like anybody else. They have to plan. They know they can't deficit or they can't go into debt. So what they do is they okay, everybody, all the departments head, tell me how much money you need. So they go back and they all that up and say, for example, just use a number. Say for the schools, it's about $120 million is a total budget, somewhere in there, 130, depending on what you count. So they get that back, and everybody says, well, I need this much money. For example, I need to give a $2.5 million pay raise to the teachers, which of course is what was happening this year. You wanted to buy new all smart boards, or now the smart boards are no good, so now you're going to buy all new big screen TVs, and you got computers, you got to upgrade computers, you got to buy software, you got to do all that kind of stuff. The main thing is personnel. I think it's about 85% of our budget goes to paying staff, mainly teachers. Okay. So then they get this money. All the department heads send them how much money they need to keep going next year. Then they look back and say, ooh, how much money do we got to come in? That's what a deficit is. Now, by having said that, it's because they have a deficit. They say, oh, look, we eliminated $2.5 million, remember, last June, or 2.3. They did that. Does that mean their expenditures went down? No, it doesn't mean that at all. If you look at the expenditures of our school district, they've been pretty steady now because we've had large decreases of enrollment, but it has never went down. It's staying right there. Now you can say, well, gee, it doesn't keep up with inflation. That's not legitimate either because we've had a decrease in enrollment. The amount of money that we spend per student is we're one of the highest schools in the state that we spend per student. So that deficit is kind of meaningless because in most places like you and I, when we balance our checkbook, we can't say, well, gee, I want to buy a new Porsche 911 and then tell my spouse or my wife or your husband that, gee, hey, our budget means I'm going to buy a $200,000 Porsche 911. They look at you and say, huh? You crazy?
What color do you want it in?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to say no. And okay, they're not buying a new Porsche 911, but they are basically spending money that they don't have. And what we would do, we would look at our budget. We know how much money we're going to come in. We know how much money we make. We make some money in our side businesses, all that kind of stuff. But we know that we can't spend any more money than the number one that what sets our budget is how much money we have coming in. Not how much money we want to spend.
Right.
Not how much money our wish is to spend. The deficit is based on wishes. And the reality is that if this is how much money you think you're going to have coming in based on property tax. I mean, those are legitimate. All the state, mostly state funding, a little bit of federal money. Okay, we're going to have $120 million. Well, that amount hasn't went down, Marcy. So the deficit is really a made-up thing by bureaucrats to make it sound like the sky is falling. We've seen it in the federal government all the time, the agencies I work for. You can mark it down on your calendar. Come October 1st with the new fiscal year in the federal government, all the men are going to say, oh my God, we didn't get any money. We have a big deficit and blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what, the federal expenditures went from $2 trillion when I was in there 10 years ago to $4 trillion now. So there's been no reduction in federal spending at all. It's went up astronomically, exponentially, I should say, and astronomically.
Yeah.
That's the same thing on local budgets here too. No, there's no, the deficit is just a made up bureaucracy, bureaucratic term. So, okay, now why do they do that? So they can say the sky is falling. It's the biggest game in town. It's the oldest name in town. Most people know that. And of course, the bureaucracies are going to say they have a deficit. You look at the reality is that their expenditures and their revenues, they come on a little line there. It hasn't went down at all. They claimed here in the last referendum that they had cut, I think it was $60 million in expenditures. No, they didn't. There wasn't $1 reduction in their expenditures.
Well, didn't they do that, though, Art, through closing all these schools?
Okay, Marcy, you're making fun of the Duluth schools and the Duluth News Tribune's reporting?
Me? Never. I'm talking what I saw.
Okay,
And,
no, there have been no savings in the school. The expenditures have went up. The number of students are going down. The expenditures are going up. That's it's not going up real fast because the number of students are going down quite sharply. But yeah, that's the budget. It's that shell game. Does the Duluth News Tribune get that? No, they don't get it at all. They just buy that. Oh my God, we have a $6 million deficit. Oh my God, we have to raise money for the poor children. They're going to be starving. We don't give food to children in school. Oh, gee, excuse me. I'm just saying that facetiously. I mean, the thing is that they do not look at the numbers at all. They don't know what the annual budget is. That's a reporter. There's no reporting done by the Duluth News Tribune, so nothing comes out that's at all truthful about the budget. Except they're going to come out here this fall. The drum was rolling, and they're going to be going for a big referendum. And now I'm all for the children. I'm a supporter of public education more probably than you are, Marcy. But I don't think money should be squandered. I don't think children should be used as an excuse to raise taxes when there's no accountability of the money that they get. Educators are no more different from anybody else. We have a checks and balances in our government system that says that you get money, you should be accountable for how it's spent. And just because you say this is for the children doesn't mean that you can squander money. And that's what's been happening in our school district.
And I can't say that I disagree. I absolutely 100% agree with you. We are not using the monies. And what government agency, quite frankly, does use the money wisely, that people go out there and earn, and strive, and it's a vicious cycle of what's happening. But when we're not even educating the kids, I mean, that's the crime of the century as far as I'm concerned, because that's what education's for. It's to make these students prepared to go out there and be productive and give back into their community. And you send them out without a proper education, what is happening to them. It didn't happen when I went to school. And it grieves me to know that my old alma mater, Denfeld, is performing so poorly. To me, there's no excuse for it. But unless the public is willing to do their homework before an election, which they obviously did not do, they listened to the slick tricks that these candidates spouted, and the Duluth News-Tribune helped them by printing the nice stuff about the slime advertising and whatnot that those candidates did. So I think the district got exactly what it deserves. It's sad, but unfortunately that is exactly what's happening. And it'll take more people, like we saw at some of the school board meetings from time to time, it'll take more people that'll finally gather together with enough power and say enough is enough. And I don't think we're ready for that day yet. I think we're going to have to see harder times, unfortunately.
Well, a couple of things I wanted to say when you said there about the government. I had this remember this thought. I think it's maybe by Woody Guthrie. There's a saying that we only get half the government we pay for. Thank God we don't get any more. And
ooh, yes.
And that's really what's happening here. One, yeah, they think they keep needing more money all the time, and it's understandable, but they're not spending our money well. And now I think that there is good public education systems. I think I don't know of any offhand, but I think there is some good ones there. The school I grew up, the little school I grew up in Warroad, Minnesota, I think is a pretty good school. And I think that there are good schools out there. I think there is people that really do care, that try to engage the public, that inform the public. They want to be part of the public. I mean, we are a community, and what's our number one thing in our community? Our schools. I think the number one thing anyway. And you must engage that community. You must get buy-in from that community. You must get parents that say that, yes, you're doing a good job. Yes, you care about my children. Yes, you care about their education. Like you said, yes, I want to make sure our children are graduating, that they are smart, that they can deal with the world, they can get jobs, and they can deal socially with the future, which is always changing. That's what we need, and we obviously don't have that in Duluth, and we have just the opposite of that. So again, we didn't talk about the education. We've talked about it before, about the deficiencies we have in our education process. We mainly talked about money here today, but unfortunately, if you don't take care of your money, you're going to have a hard time dealing with those other things, and the emphasis is really totally wrong. Emphasis right now is talking about deficits and pissing and moaning about how bad they don't get enough money from the state, or Duluthians are too cheap to give them any money. Woe is us, and blah, 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 blah. Rather than dealing with how can they spend the money that they've got. Most of us, like you and I, as a budget, we know how much money we have, and we find a way to live within that budget. And remember, we weren't told we were going to have a $6 million deficit this year. When we passed the budget, we were told we had a zero deficit. We were told we had a $1 million increase in wages. Turned out it was 2.5. That's the latest number.
Oh, my
goodness. They lied to us.
Oh.
The administration lied to us. They did not tell us what the increased wages were going to cost. They told us literally it was going to be $1 million this year. I mean, I got all the numbers there. And it turned out 2.5. I don't know which one is right. Is it another lie? Who knows? When you got incompetent people running their finances, people that don't care if they lie to the public, people that don't care about the people that are feeding them, that don't care about biting the hand that feeds them, that's what's going to happen, and that's where we're at. And sorry, I'm being open about this, Marcia. You wanted the truth.
Well, and that's
I'm not on the board anymore. I don't have to sit there and kowtow to those people.
Well, and I don't think you really kowtowed to him before, but you just had a hard time impregnating their thick skin, and they retaliated against you to keep you quiet. And I'm always glad to know that you weren't quiet and you did your best to try and inform the people.
Well, here's the difference, though. Thank you for saying that. I was vocal
Yes.
about the money. I was vocal about the achievement gap. One thing that I never did was I never criticized anybody directly. I'm working with these people, and I can criticize about our lack of enrollment, the poor graduation rates, and I did that because I thought that was my job. My job is morally and ethically to be able to represent our community, and the community is not happy about the way things are going in our schools. What I didn't do was saying who was to blame for this all the time. I think it was very rare that you ever heard me say any names. I did not point my finger at people. They pointed their finger at me all the time. I mean, these people are vicious.
Well,
they
they
went
were.
after me big time.
Yep.
The Duluth News Tribune carried the ball for them to try to destroy me. I never personally attacked anybody.
Right.
Now I'm saying that yes. Now what I'm free to do now is that I don't have to work with these people anymore. I can tell the truth that the superintendent is financially incompetent. He cannot run this district. The chief financial officer is just saying he's just saying whatever the superintendent says. We lost our two best people in the district, which is Amy Starzecki and Mike Carey. And I'm really worried about the future. And the responsibility does not sit with the board. The responsibility sits with who runs the school, which is the superintendent. He's been known all along. He's told me in private that, well, I agree with you, but I can't say this in public. He agrees with all the waste that has gone to paying off these debts through the general fund. He knows that's the case. He's never denied that to me personally. In public, he'll never say it. Don't ask me why. But now it's time that some of the truth be told about this. And when the administration refuses to do acknowledgement, refuses to find any ways out of the financial black hole they've got us in, somebody is responsible. And who's responsible? Not the board, because the board is impotent. The people responsible is the superintendent and his chief financial officer.
Well, I will speculate why he would not come forward. It takes a special person with backbone to admit, I'm wrong. And if you cannot admit that you're wrong, you will cover up and try to push the problem off on everybody else. You will look for an scapegoat, but you will not say, I made a mistake, I am wrong. Most people don't want to do that, and I've seen that in various things that I've been in the past, and so I think that that's what's going on. And it's too bad, because he could go a long way by just admitting it and saying, we're going to get down and we're going to get this thing straightened out. But our time is gone, and that just goes by so quickly when you're here, Art. So we'll have to.
There's a lot to say, and
more.
I'll be saying more.
Do more in the future, and I appreciate what you're doing with you're writing your articles, and hopefully people will pick up the two papers that you mentioned, especially the Zenith, where you're writing, because it's coming straight from you about the financial picture that we're dealing with, and appreciate the fact that you gave up 8 years of your life to get that thickly involved. It takes a lot of time and effort, and certainly you're not compensated for it in any way or shape. I understand that, but thank you very much, and we'll have you in again.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in.